Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my presentation on flipped instruction. Um, my name is Alexandra Sacramento. I'm a little nervous, I'm sorry. And I'm a graduate student from Azusa Pacific University. I'm in my first year at the Master's TESOL program over there. And I actually was very inspired by one of my classes to do this conference proposal. So I hope you enjoy the flipped instruction as much as I do. And a little more about me. First of all, this setup is actually my husband's setup. You don't need anything fancy like this. He's a gamer, so it's convenient for me. And I also have 2 years of experience. I worked in Japan for 2 years as an EFL teacher on the JET program. So if you're interested in knowing about the JET program, I'm more than willing to talk about it after. But let's get started. So I just wanted to let you guys know on your right side near the file section, I did upload a copy of this presentation. I uploaded a PDF document including all of the different tools I'm going to be talking about, as well as the screencast programs. And there's a document that I'm going to show on the presentation that's very small, and I apologize in advance. So I also uploaded that there so you can follow. So I just want a disclaimer in a way. My objective is not to persuade you to change your current classroom, but to just inform you, to educate you about this growing approach. It's becoming more and more popular, especially during this situation we're currently in. And I just wanted to touch on it. And I believe the keynote speaker yesterday actually mentioned this approach. So I hope this gives you even more detail about how to use it online in an ESL context. I hope that some of you aren't aware of flipped instruction, but if you are, I hope there's new information and new tools that you can use in your own classroom. So the first question I want all of you to think about, and you're probably already thinking about, is what is flipped instruction and what are the benefits of flipped instruction? The next question might be, how does this apply to online teaching? Does this work asynchronously, or is it only for synchronous learning? Excuse me. And you might be overwhelmed by the different technology and the apps that are out there. So what technology or apps can you use in your own classroom using this approach? And finally, this is a huge question for many people who are actually afraid of using the flipped approach is, what if I'm not tech savvy? And that's totally okay. I just want to warn everyone, there's a little bit of a lag. So if I'm going too fast, feel free to just say in the chat that you didn't see the slide or anything. So first, I want to compare flipped instruction with a traditional classroom. In this case, we're going to talk about an online classroom. So traditionally, in school or in a Zoom meeting, you get instructed by the teacher. And then at home, you're asked to complete these assignments. But with flipped instruction, you essentially do the reverse. So the teacher facilitates student collaboration, allows more interaction, and then students are asked to watch videos of the lectures on their own time at home. So flipped classrooms allow for, as I mentioned, more interaction. I apologize for the formatting mishap right here. But it allows for more interaction and meaningful activities. So students can collaborate more, and especially during a remote learning situation like we're in right now, if you have just a bunch of instruction and lecture material, and then like maybe 5 minutes after you try to fit in an activity, it kind of gets boring and you lose this connection with your students. And with flipped instruction online, your students can watch the lecture material at their own time, at their own pace, and then come back ready to fill in any gaps or misunderstandings that they may have from the lecture material. So this is a huge focus with flipped classrooms, and it helps with that connection, like I mentioned, that we lose through virtual learning. Essentially, the instructor is the sage on the stage in a traditional classroom, but with flipped classrooms, they become a guide on the side. So students are allowed to interact more with their peers and interact more with the content material and interact more with the instructor, rather than sitting through a lecture where they just listen and write notes and maybe fall asleep, depending on what student you have. I hope they're not falling asleep. But this also builds more teamwork skills for the students that they unconsciously learn in a classroom face to face. So you build this new teamwork skills for the students online. A flipped classroom allows for more student-focused classes. So this is very important. Students, again, can collaborate with each other. They can learn more from each other, and it encourages peer instruction and things like that. Students can focus more on their needs. The instructor can focus more on the students' needs. And it doesn't leave any students behind because the lecture material they have access to whenever they want and whenever they need to use it, they have access to it. And so you have students that are more slow paced and then more advanced students. But with advanced students, they won't get as bored because they won't finish the material early because they have to do it within the class. And with the slow paced students, they don't get left behind either because they can watch the material as much as they want during homework time or anything like that. And to tie in Quizizz' theme this year, it adds for more resiliency. Things happen, life happens, and sometimes students fall behind because they have to miss class for different reasons. And so with a flipped classroom, students are able to access the material, get the material whenever they need it, and they won't fall behind. So from Bloom's taxonomy, I'm going to look at flipped instruction. Specifically, I'm going to go over Bloom's digital taxonomy, the verbs change, the writing. This is the document where I warned that is very small. So if you need to look at the document in a bigger screen, there's a file upload for you, and you can post it on your wall if you want to. But essentially, what happens is that outside the classroom, students focus on the first two levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And this happens through the pre-work, which is the pre-recorded videos that they watch. And I also mentioned that you don't have to necessarily have pre-recorded videos. You can take videos from different websites like TED Ed or Khan Academy, or you can give podcasts. You might hear me say podcast too many times in TED Talks because I'm a firm believer on both of them. But they're also great sources that you can give to your students if you're not comfortable making these pre-recorded videos. Inside the classroom, they level up. So you have more time inside the classroom to apply, to analyze, to evaluate and create material inside the classroom. And then the instructor, again, is the guide on the side. So if you need that additional help, your instructor's there. Unlike if you were assigned an assignment at home, it makes it more difficult to contact your instructor with questions you may have, and you might not finish the assignment. So this is essentially occurring with feedback as well. Feedback, discussions, and things like that. One thing I want to touch on for feedback is especially with an asynchronous classroom, I'll go more into this, is that feedback is rarely there or it's late. And so one thing that I mentioned is doing screencasts of you giving feedback to students, and it builds on to that connection that you're losing. So that's one way to do feedback. So now, like I mentioned, you're probably asking, how does this happen asynchronously? And so I want to argue that most of the online programs.
Oh, sorry, could you repeat that? We're losing your audio.
Using jump into a discussion, that's pretty much a version of online teaching, or I'm sorry, flipped instruction. So I would say this does work a little better synchronously, but you can have this happen asynchronously. So one thing you should take advantage of is the plethora of internet sources that are out there. This ties in with authentic input, and you can get different internet sources, like I mentioned, TED Talks, podcasts, additional articles that resonate with the current lesson you're teaching. Another point is you can also find sources that your students are interested in, and it helps build that connection, keeps that connection and interaction and motivation up for the students. So like I said, feedback is also very important. One example I have is I tutor a TOEFL student right now, and she writes different TOEFL prompts by herself. And she asked me to correct them for her. And so I have a Google Doc that's 16 prompts long. And I would go in and highlight different errors and things that I noticed that she kept making mistakes on. And then on top of that, I would do a screencast program, or I'd use a screencast program and explain more about my comments and things that she can work on, and also encourage her, because when you see a whole document that's just full of different colors, you might get discouraged. And so I would encourage her and tell her she's doing great and she's doing so well and things like that. So that's one way of feedback. Another way you can do feedback is through peer review feedback. So this is essentially where students meet on their own time. You can assign different peer review partners. I actually had this happen to one of my summer courses where I was assigned a peer review partner, and we would Zoom each other and talk about our final projects. So that's another great feedback source that students can use and that you can also help with. So to tie into the internet sources, authentic input is also very important. A great example of authentic input is if you do those pre-recorded videos and actually show your face, and students can connect with you outside of the classroom, even though you don't have those face-to-face meetings. And a warning for authentic material, this was actually brought up in a previous discussion, was about the authentic material you choose. And so it's important to get authentic material that's not random, but instead material that resonates with your students, that goes really well with your lesson and is targeted not for a specific group, but is that would connect well with your current students. And out of class activities. So asynchronously, this is going to be mostly discussions. If you're in an asynchronous course right now, your discussions are probably just this long written board where you write a response, comment on another peer, and you keep up that interaction that way. Another way you can do discussions is through Flipgrid, which is a video discussion platform that I actually really enjoy. And essentially you record yourself and then you can record a response to other students. Now, synchronously, this one's going to go a little more in depth, and I'm going to be going off of the synchronous online flipped learning approach, or SOFLA, however you want to pronounce it. And I actually got the inspiration for this proposal through an article I read by Helene W. Marshall, and I think it's pronounced Itzka Koska. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. I also attached that article if you're interested. It's under the PDF that says resource links. And they made this chart that goes into, it breaks down how you can do a flipped learning instruction through online teaching. And the first step is pre-work. So this happens asynchronously. And this is where you have those videos, those pre-recorded videos. If you don't like the pre-recorded videos, I suggest maybe narrated slideshows. I have a professor who does that right now. Really authentic articles that might fit really well with your lesson. There's so many options. Podcasts, again, like I mentioned, you're probably going to get tired of me saying that. But podcasts are a really great source, and you can find so many of them now that we're all inside. And then there's step 2, which is a sign-in activity. For this step, this is a great time to use that whiteboard feature on Zoom, assuming that you use Zoom in your classroom. And here you can have, right after everyone signs in, for example, if you're teaching gerunds and infinitives, you can have students come in and write a sentence using a gerund or a sentence using an infinitive. And that would be the sign-in activity for the day. Oh, I would also mention that you can use Padlet. There's so many different sources. If you don't like the whiteboard feature, you can use Padlet. There's Answer Garden, Poll Everywhere. Like I said, there's so many different resources out there. And another great example I would say is using Kahoot or Quizizz if you want that competitive feel in your classroom. Step 3 is the whole group application. This is before you decide to split them into breakout rooms, which I'll go into. Whole group application it's the beginning of the collaborative activity. So here, going back on the gerund and infinitive example, you can have students write infinitives and gerunds on the whiteboard feature on Zoom, Padlet, whatever source you want to use. And that's a great way to get the collaborative activity going. So then 4 is when you would split everyone into breakout rooms. Assuming if you're using Zoom, I'm not aware of any other platforms that have this feature. And if you are aware, feel free to add it to the chat because I'm interested. But you can use these breakout rooms and have students do either the same tasks or have students do a jigsaw activity where each room does different tasks, and then you come back and share it, which brings me to step 5, which is share out. So you bring everyone back, you go over what everyone learned, any suggestions they may have, and then tie it all together. Step 6 gets a little iffy with being outside of flipped instruction. Step 6 is preview and discovery. And here is when you hook your students into the next set of material that they're going to watch or listen or read about. You don't want to essentially give them all of the lecture content, but rather just spark their curiosity and hook them into the new material that's coming their way. Step 5 is assignment instructions. This is especially important now because there might be some students who are not tech savvy. And so you need to give these explicit directions. Have them give them your expectations for what they should learn about in the video. And nowadays you can embed questions inside your videos, which is a whole nother topic that I'm going to discuss. And then step 8 is reflection. So again, you can go back to that whiteboard feature, ask your students to write a sentence about what they loved about the lesson, what they learned, what they didn't know, or you can even use it as a review option to further help your students use the new grammar that you might be teaching. So now that you are experts on the synchronous online flipped learning approach, let's talk about some tech. And I want to warn, if you've gone to some tech presentations before mine, there's going to be a lot of overlapping. You might have heard a lot of overlapping tech and apps that I'll be discussing, excuse me. And the first topic I want to go over is screencasting. If you're not aware of screencasting, essentially you have your screen like this, and then you can have a video of you. It's similar to screen share on Zoom, but this is where you can download the videos and send the pre-recorded videos to your students. And so there's 3 examples that I have. These are the ones that I really enjoy. So I enjoy using Loom, and this is actually a preview video of me briefly showing you how Loom looks, excuse me. And Loom is free. It's a Google Chrome extension, and that has an annotation toolbar available, which is really nice. So you can write, you can highlight things, as well as students can see you in the corner while you're doing this. Another option that's very similar is Screencastify. This one's a little more straightforward. This one works well because you can upload it directly to a Google Drive. And if you're using Google Classroom, this works really well as well. They align really well. The annotation bar actually has an eraser option compared to Loom. So this is another alternative that you can use when making pre-recorded videos if you go that route. And the third option is Screencast-O-Matic. This one was a little more difficult for me to handle, but it's another great option. There's so many of them. You just have to explore which ones fit your personality and which ones fit the amount of technology you understand. So this one, the only downside of it is you don't have the annotation tools. So that's something to keep in mind. You'll have to upgrade to a different subscription. And one of my favorites, if you have an iPad or a tablet, is Explain Everything. This example is actually one I used for a lesson plan, and it's essentially a whiteboard that you can use, and you can direct students through different slides or videos.
Oh, and sorry, Alexandra, there's a bit of a lag. Could you just wait a second for it to catch up with the screen? Sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine. Can everyone see the video? Everyone good? Are we good?
I think we're good.
Okay. So, like I was saying, Explain Everything is a whiteboard that you can use on an iPad or a tablet, whatever your preference is, and you can make these connections if you enjoy writing and drawing arrows. And you can either type what you're going to talk about, or you can include different slides, PowerPoints, or videos, or things like that. So Explain Everything is really awesome. It is limited. You can only do 3 projects. I tried to only include things that were free with really good free plans, but this is an option if you're interested. Now, assessment apps. A lot of them, you can include questions inside your video. So a lot of these were probably talked about already, but I really like them, so I'm going to talk about them again. Everyone may know Edpuzzle. Edpuzzle is a great source to add questions to videos to make it more interactive, to keep your students more accountable for watching the videos. And with Edpuzzle, there's so many different platforms of questions that you can use. So one great option is, I think they added a drawing feature where you can you can pick a picture and like stick on a map, I think is a new feature. It's really awesome. A similar one, if you're interested, is Peer Deck. They also have different options, and that one works great with Google Slides. Another similar one is Nearpod, and Nearpod's a little more limited with the type of questions that you can write. So you can have multiple choice questions, you can have open-ended questions, and those are the 2 options in the free plan, I believe. And with Nearpod, your students don't necessarily need to have an account. You just send them a link, they type their name, and then you get the results almost immediately after they're done. So these are two great options for assessment apps. There's also Peer Deck, like I mentioned, and this would be great for your pre-work if you do make those pre-recorded videos. One of my favorite apps is Kahoot. It makes a very great competitive environment. I like to get my students a little rowdy in the beginning. And it's great for review. It could be used as a sign-in activity if you're looking for a different sign-in activity. And a similar one is Quizizz. And Quizizz is more student-focused compared to Kahoot. Kahoot, the teacher or the instructor is the only person who gets information about the students' answers and the questions, where Quizizz, the students can see the questions and answers. So this one's a little more, I like this one a little more than Kahoot, but those are two options that you can use for either the sign-in activity or reflection would also be a really awesome idea. This one I just learned about. It's FlexiQuiz. I didn't just learn about this. I learned about it like 2 weeks ago. But it's a great source if you want to make quizzes and like Google Forms isn't as straightforward for you. FlexiQuiz is pretty straightforward and it does analyze the answers for you as well. And you can see how your students are doing. One thing about FlexiQuiz is that you can, on the free program, you can have up to 10 questions. So it's a good quiz assignment, especially if you need a new breakout room task for your students. They can work on a quiz together. And the next option I have is Padlet. And you might have seen Padlet through the poster session boards. And this is it's essentially a wall discussion where students can write their answers to a question that you put on there or things like that. So this is also a great option for the sign-in activity, even the share out activity or a reflection activity. You can even have students do a Padlet as a homework assignment after they watch a video. So this also keeps them accountable for watching the content material or listening to the material. Other tools, if your students really want to use their mobile phones, these are great. Flipgrid, like I mentioned, I love Flipgrid. It builds that connection that students are losing through remote learning. So you can see your other classmates, respond to them, tell them what you like, and things like that. This is available both on the computer and the cell phone, where most students will use. TED-Ed. If you're not interested or you don't have time in making your own teaching material, so the pre-recorded videos, TED-Ed is a great source. It's a video-based lesson website. Their videos are about 5 minutes in length, which is also a great option. If you like Khan Academy is also a great option. I use Khan Academy for my GRE studies, so I rely on it heavily. But I also really love TED Talks, so TED-Ed is a great source. And Powtoon, if you want to take the challenge in creating an animated video, Powtoon's a great option. It's very colorful, and it might be really helpful for the younger students. If you don't want to give your phone number or you don't like emails, Remind is a private messaging platform. It's really good for scheduling a reminder to be sent out to your students, whether it's about due dates that are coming up or class cancellation, or to remind them to watch that pre-recorded video you worked so hard on. And if you don't have a specific learning management system, currently I use Canvas for my school. If you don't, Edmodo works really well. It's very very user-friendly. And if you don't like Edmodo, or you want to test a different learning management system, there's Seesaw. And Seesaw is also a great option to use. And if you're into graphic designing, making really cool infographics and presentations, I used Canva to make this presentation. And it's a great place where you can get different templates if you want to just spice up your class a little. So now that you're experts on tools and flipped instruction, there are some cautions that I want to mention and that you're probably thinking about. So one is, what if there's a lack of student discipline? It's one of the things that people think about when they make this new approach in their classroom. They use this new approach in their classroom. So my suggestion is to start small. Don't just throw your students into a flipped classroom and expect them to know everything. Start with maybe having them watch a 5-minute video and then coming back the next day and testing and seeing who actually watched the video, who understood the video. Especially with students who aren't as tech savvy, this is really important. And you want to get them on that same page before fully taking that challenge and jumping into a full hybrid classroom. Inform the parents, depending on the age group you're teaching. So inform the parents, inform your students, make sure everyone's on the same page, and tell them, this is specifically for parents, inform them why their student is learning the content material at home. And a good explanation for this is it's more exposure outside of the classroom, especially if the target language isn't what they speak at home. It exposes them even further. And attention. This may be a little more difficult, but try to get everyone on the same platform, same page. Try to keep them reeled in. Don't pay attention to just one specific student. Pay attention to all of them, even though that sounds impossible with 15 to 20 students in a classroom. But this is really where you can split them up into those breakout rooms and pop up and make sure and ask them, do they understand the material? Is there any questions? And things like that. You might be asking, what if there's a lack of resources? And like I mentioned, and what a huge part of the flipped instruction is creating your own material, creating your own videos, things like that. And that's when screencasting comes really important and comes you can use really well in this case. Find teacher-made material online, TED Ed, Khan Academy. Even see if a colleague is using this approach in their classroom and has material that you can probably use. And maybe you guys can switch materials in your 2 classrooms. Keep it simple. If you're not tech savvy, I'm not telling you to go out, get 4 computer screens, a tablet, or an iPad, a nice mic, or anything like that. You can simply have a piece of paper, writing on it, have someone help you record the video on your phone, and that could work as well. Or you can, if you're really into the whiteboard, you can have a whiteboard behind you, make sure the writing's visible for the students. Or you can just narrate slideshows, and that works as well because students can hear you and they can interact with the material a little better than just flipping through PowerPoint presentations. And you can get your students involved. Some students might want an extra challenge. They might want to record a video on a specific topic they like. And so you can use that too in the classroom as long as you get permission from them. As well as you can use old material that students have submitted to you. Ask them if you can use it in future classes, and you have additional material you can give to your students. And if you're still unsure, there's a variety of ways you can do flipped instruction. You don't necessarily have to do the standard of every day they watch a video, every day you have the activities. Just explore this approach a little more. So you can do 1 day a week where you can maybe have flipped Fridays and create this habit of students watching a video Thursday night and then coming the next day ready with questions and ready to do meaningful learning. You can do select content. You can select where you want to use this approach on. For example, I like to use this approach. It works really well with grammar. Grammar gets really dry if students are just sitting there and you're showing them a textbook and going over the textbook examples. The grammar, you can use a screencasting platform and teach them the grammar. And then the next day, see if they have any questions. And then if they don't, jump into activities, and you can actually gauge who's actually lying and who's telling the truth and things like that. So I like using grammar. I attempted to use it for vocabulary, teaching them vocabulary through a flashcard system. I don't know if that was very effective or not, but that's another option if you want to use flipped instruction for. And like I mentioned, you can flip with no recorded videos. You can use podcasts. You can use articles. You can use narrated slideshows. You can even just send them the slideshows depending on the grade level or English level of your students. And then once you're comfortable and once your students are comfortable with the new approach that you're using, the new method, you can jump right into a fully hybrid classroom and see where the students are lacking and then test something else. So just really exploring with this flipped instruction is how you're going to see if it works or not in your classroom. So I want to reassure everyone that I know flipped instruction is intimidating. I was very intimidated when I started doing it for my tutoring sessions, but I really suggest that you explore this approach a little in your classroom, test the waters, see what works for your students. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. You really have to see and gauge whether it works for your classroom and your students. And I just want to reassure everyone that this flipped instruction really allows the teacher to be present, even though they're not physically present. And that's what students are missing because they're missing this connection. So I hope that I helped and I gave you a clear understanding of flipped instruction. And I want to thank everyone for coming to my presentation. So now, oh, go ahead, Michelle.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. Now, there's still a lot of time. There's like 7 minutes. And I see someone says YouTube videos on grammar versus creating your own. It depends on what YouTube videos you find, making sure that it fits really well with your class. I've used like Rach for pronunciation. I've used Rachel's English. She works really well with pronunciation. It just depends on, you can do YouTube videos on grammar, but you can cater it a little more better with creating your own videos. I hope that explained it. Our class uses teacher-created vocabulary with Quizlet. Quizlet's also a great option. I love Quizlet. I utilize flipped instruction in my college classes. Thank you. But is there any other questions? Do you have any recommendations for beginning level?
Yes, over in the question box.
Yeah. ESL students. I don't know if you guys see the same ad, but the Diesel podcast above is really good. I don't actually have any for beginning level ESL podcasts. You can go for specific ESL podcasts, or you can even go for something that's different. It's targeted for a different genre, I would say. Is Files a podcast that I should be aware of?
Oh, I think Sophia's looking for, let's see, one of the articles. Sophia, is that the Bloom's taxonomy or a different one?
Diesel podcast. If you're looking for the article that I used for the synchronous part of this, it's under Flip It resource links. It's all the way at the bottom. So you'll get on that link, there's an explanation of the screencast options I gave, as well as the different links to apps that I talked about, and then the Bloom's taxonomy. There's an actual website to it. It's on Wabi Sabi Learning. And then the article, I gave a link. Hopefully it works. Is there any other questions, concerns, comments?
There was a question. Do you happen to know what microphone you're using? Because you sound wonderful.
Do I sound wonderful? Thank you. I actually don't know which one I'm using. It says Audio Technica. Um,
Okay.
my husband actually helped someone set up their computer setup, so this mic might not be available. But thank you. I'll let him know. But I see you guys like Flipgrid. Flipgrid's great. Oh, there's even more podcast options. Shaw Currington actually uploaded a great link to 17 English podcasts.
Let's see, looks like there's a question about Kahoot and Zoom.
Any tips on adapting Kahoot to Zoom? I've only done it face-to-face. Would students need 2 devices? I would suggest, for tech-savvy sake, to have 2 devices. So if they're allowed to have their cell phone next to them, Kahoot works really well on the cell phone. And then you can share your screen whenever students submit the answers. So you can have the screen, because with a Kahoot, you get a specific code and students have to put that code on their Kahoot app. And if they're able to switch on and off between tabs, they can use it on the computer as well. One to see the questions and one to see answer. Yeah. Oh, I'm seeing new questions that I didn't even see. Do you think flipped learning is available for young learners? You can do flipped. This is where talking to the parents is really important, because you need to get both parties on the same subject or on the same topic. So I suggest talking to the parents, telling them what's going to happen and things like that. But I definitely think it could happen for young learners. It might be a little more difficult compared to adults because they're not as tech savvy, or maybe they are. I'll be teaching overseas with weak connections. Which tool is easiest for use in this situation? Do you mean, Pamela, do you mean the screencast options? I'm not sure how to answer. Overseas, when I was in Japan, I lived with weak connections. And so what happens is sometimes you have to turn off your camera. If that happens, if lagging occurs. Files next to people, you can find files. Where did I find? Okay. Some students use their phone. That's a difficult question to answer. If they use their phones to view classes, I'm not sure how all phones work. I'm an iPhone user. You could essentially they could attempt to do Kahoot. So they don't sign off the meeting, but they can attempt to do Kahoot on their phone that way. I'm sorry, I don't have more insight on that. Missed the part of this workshop. Will it be available? So this workshop is going to be recorded. It's recording right now. It's available for the next 5 years. And you can keep watching if you want to, or you can just click on the files section, and I have a copy of the presentation there. How long do you spend? The question's how long do you spend making your own video? If you're very organized and you have all the prep work done, I spend maybe 10 minutes on a video. I don't really edit. I try to do it all in one shot because I don't feel like editing. But if editing is something you enjoy, you can do it maybe within an hour, depending on the lesson that you're teaching. I also want to warn about making videos a little shorter. Don't do like hour-long lectures. And if you choose to do hour-long lectures, that's fine. But making short videos, like 5 to 10 minute videos, might be more beneficial. To answer your question, Shaw, I don't know if someone's answered. As long as you have this link to the event, you get access to all the videos, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and if you want to kind of test out looking at a pre-recorded presentation, the Friday morning ones are available now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But our time has come. If anyone has any last minute questions, that file that has the resource links has my email on it. If you're interested in contacting me or just want to say hi, I don't mind. But other than that, thank you guys so much for coming to the presentation. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of Quizizz.
All right, stopping stream. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.